Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Macro Anarchist YouTube channel. Triffin's dilemma, also known as Triffin's paradox, emerged as a fundamental critique of the role of national currencies, primarily the US dollar, as global reserve currencies. Named after economist Robert Triffin, the dilemma points out an inherent conflict in having a single country's currency serve both domestic and global needs. The global reserve currency must supply enough liquidity to meet international demands, requiring a consistent trade deficit. However, these deficits can erode confidence in that currency's stability, threatening both its domestic economy and its global reserve status. This conflict, identified by Triffin in the 1960s, highlights the unsustainable nature of a system that relies on one country's currency to support global trade and liquidity. Triffin argued that the system designed under the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, which established the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency pegged to gold, would eventually lead to instability. The dilemma emphasizes that a country issuing the reserve currency faces a paradox. It must either supply enough liquidity for global trade, running deficits that weaken its currency, or protect its currency's value by limiting liquidity, stifling global economic growth. The Bretton Woods system laid the foundation for the global financial structure after World War II. Under this system, the US dollar was pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce, while other currencies were pegged to the dollar. This arrangement positioned the dollar as the anchor for international trade, establishing trust and stability in global transactions. The US had the economic might to support this system, controlling approximately two-thirds of the world's gold reserves post-war, making the dollar a logical choice for the world's reserve currency. However, as global trade expanded, other nations accumulated dollars to participate in international markets. To maintain global liquidity, the US needed to supply more dollars, which it did by running trade deficits and increasing spending abroad. This created a conflict. While the global economy required a growing dollar supply, these deficits could threaten the dollar's stability and the US's ability to maintain the gold peg, creating the foundation of Triffin's dilemma. Triffin's dilemma can be understood through three primary aspects. Foremost is liquidity requirements. For the US dollar to function as the global reserve currency, it must be accessible worldwide. The dollar's availability fuels trade and finance, enabling international transactions and foreign investments. However, this requires the US to consistently run trade deficits, supplying dollars through borrowing and deficit spending. As other nations accumulate dollar reserves, they become more dependent on the dollar and, in turn, on US economic policies. Next we have balance of payments. To maintain global liquidity, the US incurs persistent trade deficits. A trade surplus would limit dollar supply and impede global trade, but deficits lead to growing international claims against US assets. Over time, large trade deficits could reduce confidence in the dollar's value, creating potential currency crises and increasing inflationary pressures domestically. Confidence and stability. A global reserve currency must be stable to foster trust among countries that rely on it for international trade and investment. Triffin's dilemma suggests that as the US issues more dollars to meet global demand, it risks devaluing its currency and undermining confidence. Should trust in the dollar decline significantly, nations may seek alternative reserve currencies, jeopardizing the dollar's role and leading to economic uncertainty worldwide. Triffin's dilemma led to the Nixon shock and the end of the gold standard. Triffin's concerns materialized in 1971, when President Richard Nixon took steps that effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. Known as the Nixon shock, this event marked the end of dollar convertibility to gold. As foreign reserves of dollars grew, confidence in the US's ability to uphold the gold standard dwindled. Other countries began to exchange their dollars for gold, straining US reserves. The Nixon shock severed the dollar's tie to gold, leading to the system of floating exchange rates we have today. While the dollar remained the primary reserve currency, it was no longer backed by gold, allowing the US more flexibility in monetary policy. This shift highlighted Triffin's warning. As long as a national currency serves global needs, it faces inherent challenges balancing domestic economic stability with global liquidity. Modern manifestations of Triffin's dilemma. Though the gold standard ended, Triffin's dilemma persists, impacting economies worldwide. We must understand the dollar's dominance in global markets. The dollar continues to be the leading reserve currency, representing around 60% of global reserves. Nations around the world hold significant dollar reserves to stabilize their economies and participate in global trade. This dependency, however, means that U.S. monetary policy decisions affect not only domestic but also global markets. For instance, when the U.S. Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates, it impacts borrowing costs, inflation, and investment flows worldwide, which impacts emerging markets and debt vulnerabilities. Many emerging economies issue dollar-denominated debt, making them susceptible to U.S. interest rate fluctuations and currency value changes. When the dollar strengthens, repaying dollar debt becomes more costly for these countries, which can lead to debt crises and economic instability, as seen in countries like Argentina and Turkey. Quantitative easing and global liquidity. In response to financial crises, the U.S. Federal Reserve has implemented quantitative easing, QE, increasing dollar liquidity to stimulate economic growth. This increases the dollar's global supply but can also devalue it, posing risks to foreign nations holding large dollar reserves. A prolonged QE could reduce confidence in the dollar, aligning with Triffin's concerns about liquidity versus stability. China and the search for alternatives. China's economy has grown significantly, and the Chinese yuan, CNY, has emerged as a potential alternative to the dollar. China has promoted the yuan in international trade, particularly in Asia and Africa, and created frameworks such as the Belt and Road Initiative to encourage yuan-denominated transactions. However, the yuan lacks the depth and accessibility of the dollar, limiting its appeal as a global reserve. Because of the reasons mentioned previously, possible solutions to Triffin's dilemma are currently being explored and presented. For example, a multi-currency reserve system. One potential solution is a multi-currency reserve system where countries diversify their reserves across various currencies, reducing reliance on the dollar. Such a system would mitigate the risks associated with any single currency's devaluation. However, it requires a coordinated effort among major economies and stable currency alternatives. Special drawing rights, SDRs. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, created special drawing rights, SDRs, in 1969 as a basket of major currencies, offering an alternative reserve asset. While SDRs have yet to replace the dollar, expanding their use could distribute the burden of global liquidity more evenly across economies. Digital currencies. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are being explored by multiple nations, including China and the European Union, as digital reserves. A well-managed digital currency could theoretically serve as a global reserve without the constraints of a national economy. However, digital currencies also face adoption, regulatory, and trust challenges. U.S. fiscal responsibility. Some argue that the U.S. should work to balance trade deficits and control its debt to avoid compromising the dollar's stability. Greater fiscal discipline could improve confidence in the dollar's long-term value, though this may conflict with domestic economic goals and growth. Triffin's dilemma remains relevant and obvious to this day, highlighting the complexities of an interconnected global economy reliant on a single nation's currency. Although the Bretton Woods system has ended, the dollar's dominance continues to pose challenges to global economic stability. The dilemma underscores the need for reform in the international monetary system, suggesting a move toward diversified reserves, innovative digital currencies, or IMF-based solutions like SDRs. As the global economy evolves, the world faces pressing questions. Can an alternative currency effectively replace the dollar? Would a multi-currency reserve system create more stability? Or will emerging technologies such as digital currencies shift the balance? Triffin's insights continue to inform these debates, reminding us of the paradoxes that arise when one nation's currency carries the weight of the world's economic needs. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments how you think Triffin's dilemma should be solved.